What is up, everybody? My name is Augie Schmidt. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about 3 of the best ways of how to increase value of commercial real estate property. Now, before I get into it, I just want to say that there are many more ways to increase value to commercial real estate property, but these are 3 of the main ways, and also I've seen people make truckloads of money using these 3 strategies, so I wanted to get on here, lay them out, and share them with you guys. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe this video. It helps the channel go further faster and is something that I really appreciate. So to get into our video, the first way of how to increase value of commercial real estate is pretty simple. I want to start off in the foundation, and everybody should know this, but this is just by improving the building. So some would argue this because improving the building actually costs you money and does not increase income right away. However, this makes things a lot easier down the road if you're going to lease it or sell it. A nicer building is just a nicer building, and it can you can charge more money to rent it, or when you go to sell the asset, it's worth more. So there are many different types of building improvements you can make. I mean, some of the easiest ones are like, paint and asphalt, maybe redoing the parking lot, restriping it, maybe there's a new roof, or it might be interior repairs. So, you never know what these buildings are going to consist of, especially with all the different property types. So retail, office, industrial, multifamily, and they all consist of different type of improvements. And also it's good to know what type of assets you're going to get your most bang for your buck per improvement. So for multifamily, for example, the granite countertops and the new LVP floors, those go a long way, and that helps renters say, hey, this is a really nice place to live and to have my family. So that's something that they value. Whereas in a industrial building, it's probably not LVP and granite countertops. I mean, those guys, maybe it's additional office space, or it's a new roll-up door, loading dock, whatever it is. But for different property types, there's different types of improvements that you can make to the building. But overall, paint always helps every asset class. Parking lots, every single piece of commercial real estate, you're going to have a parking lot, and they all need to be resurfaced eventually. So doing that, they all have roofs. So general repairs like that will increase the value of the commercial property. But there are things like I just mentioned that can help increase the NOI, which we will talk about next, but the renter's perceived value of the space. So people are willing to pay more for a nicer space that is more functional to them. And like I said, that varies of each and every different asset class, because renters perceive different things of valuable in each different property type. So for number 2, we are going to be talking about increasing NOI. Now, this one is incredibly hard to argue with, because if there is income attached to a building, normally it makes it more valuable. And I say normally just because, sometimes there can be long-term leases that aren't as favorable, but we can talk about that later. But increasing the income to a property makes it more valuable. So when making improvements, like I said before, you want to know the things that renters like and they perceive as valuable, so you can increase the NOI. Nobody likes a landlord that comes in there and just jacks up the rents and says, because there's a new ownership in town and hey, this is what the market is, they can increase rents. I mean, a lot of the time that is the reality of the situation. However, good landlords and the best landlords make it a nicer place for their tenants to either live in or operate their business. So truly, there are only 2 ways to increase your NOI, and that is 1, by increasing your income, or number 2, by decreasing your expenses. So on the top line at income, this can be things like I just mentioned, like rental rates, or maybe there's other income opportunities with the properties. I know for multifamily, maybe it's laundromat or additional rentals of garages or self-storage in a multifamily complex. Or if it's an industrial property, say you have a warehouse, but maybe there's some laydown yard that you can rent out, or you want to make it a nicer building and you can increase the rent. So there are a multitude of ways to increase the NOI. However, the only 2 ways are increasing the income and decreasing the expenses. On the expenses front, you want to be careful about this, because if it's an occupancy issue, so if your NOI is low because your occupancy is low, say there's a business park and it has 60% occupancy, hey, well, you can fill it up 40 more percent. Well, a part of that occupancy, a lot of the times you're going to have more expenses involved, because if there's nobody in the properties, if there's nobody in 40% of the buildings, then there's no wear and tear, wear, there's no damage, there's no people running into walls, which hopefully, the tenant will cover that, or whoever runs into the wall. But there's part of that property is just going unused. So a lot of the times there's not many expenses associated with it. So if you increase your occupancy, you can usually see an increase in your expenses, but that's just something to keep an eye out for. So last but not least, I'm going to throw a little bit of a curveball here, and I'm not going to go with the normal multifamily, retail, or industrial properties, but I'm going to focus more on land just because I've seen people make 200, 300, 400% on their money in our market. And we live in slightly a more rural market than, say, downtown Tampa or downtown Orlando, even though these can both be done there as well. But in markets that there's a little bit more land, but enough activity going on to make that land valuable for commercial use, this is a strategy I've seen people do really well with, and that is zoning and entitlements. So what I mean by zoning and entitlements is changing the use on the property. So this is most often done with a piece of raw or agricultural land, and then it is rezoned for something else. Now, it happens all the time with, say, retail land to multifamily or multifamily to industrial or whatever that is. You can change the zoning and land use as long as your local municipality will approve it, and that takes a slew of things like land use attorneys and site plans. However, this is a process that can be used to increase the value of a piece of land in commercial real estate. So for zoning and entitlements, this is a great way to increase the value of a piece of commercial real estate property, and we most often see this with land. So this does happen too with industrial properties or multifamily. Say it's a dilapidated shopping center and they're going to turn it into a multifamily project. They demolish a shopping center, they rezone it to multifamily, and that is a changing of zoning entitlements. We see that all the time as well. But what I'm talking about is mainly just raw land with no buildings. So we see this in our market a lot because we're right in between Tampa and Orlando. And I think it's a little bit different to see in a city like urban Tampa because downtown there's just less land available. So places like Lakeland, where we still have a thriving local economy, but there are more land tracts around the economy and businesses are growing and moving here, it gives an opportunity for developers, investors, and landowners to change their zoning and entitlements and greatly increase the value of their property. So for this example, I want to talk about a piece of agricultural land. So say we take 20 acres of agricultural land, which was a former citrus grove, which if you live in Florida, you know about Florida citrus. This has happened a lot over the past 10, 20, 30 years, where there's a dying citrus grove and all of a sudden there's development that is coming in all around it. Say there's single family coming around it, maybe there's new retail, maybe some self-storage, but there's things happening all around this piece of agricultural land. And say the town is moving that way, and you really can't just rezone and entitle any piece of commercial land or any piece of land and say, hey, I want it to be this. As I mentioned before, you really have to have a solid proposal put forth in front of your local municipality. And you have a group of land use attorneys and civil engineers, site engineers, and come together with a plan and show them, hey, this is what it can be, and this is what we would like it to be, and here's why. So this is not easy, but it can be done. And I would say it's easier than actually building a building and increasing NOI that way. And sometimes it's a shorter process. This can take a while, especially on big projects. However, this can just be done with a raw piece of land and no buildings. So for our example, I want to take 20 acres of agricultural land and we're going to rezone it to a multifamily use. So say we have 20 acres and say it's sold for $10,000 an acre. So this property now is just acquired for $200,000. And now all of a sudden we are going to take this 20 acres and we are going to take it through a rezoning process and we're going to try and get it zoned for a multifamily use. So as I mentioned, if you have a great group of land use attorneys and civil and site engineers and you put together a plan and you go and talk to your local government and you get them to approve this zoning, and say you get 20 units to the acre. So for a piece of commercial real estate and it's 20 acres and you have 20 units to the acre, you now have 400 units that you can build on that piece of commercial property. So after the zoning and entitlements are approved and you have went through this process, say it took, probably at the fastest, you're talking 4 to 6 months, but, sometimes it can be 9, 12, 15, 2 years this can take place. But once you have this and you have the zoning and entitlements from a, piece of agricultural land, which was a dying citrus grove, and now is approved for 400 multifamily units, you can then take this property to market. You can do a JV development. More often than not, we see landowners and developers just take it to market and let one of the big national multifamily developers take this project on, because that's what they are looking for and that's what they do best. They take already zoned and entitled land and they turn it into a multifamily project. So say in our market, 400 unit multifamily property, just the land, it would probably sell for about $15,000 per unit. So if you take 400 units and then you multiply it times $15,000 per unit, that is $6 million. Now, from a $200,000 piece of land to a $6 million sale, this is a crazy, crazy increase. And, maybe the land could be more expensive at first. Maybe you sell it for less. Maybe it's only worth $10,000 per unit, or maybe you only get 250 units. This is a grand slam of a deal, and you are going to have more expenses involved under this 200,000. So say, land use attorneys, site planning, civil engineers, soil studies, anything you do to tee up the development for a national multifamily developer and increasing the density, there's going to be costs associated with that. But $100,000, maybe $200,000, it's not going to be a crazy amount of money. That's not going to make this that's going to make this a bad investment for you, especially if you're able to cash out around this number. So these are 3 of some of the best ways to increase value to commercial real estate. And as I said before, there are many more ways to increase value. And while I just went over these 3 points in probably 10 minutes, these usually take a long time. They take a lot of money, and it also takes knowing what is valuable in your market. So you want to make sure, especially building improvements or also trying to increase your NOI, you have to know your market and what the renter desires in order to increase the value of your property. So also, even with zoning and entitlements, if you try to go make a multifamily project and the area around it, it does not support a multifamily project of this size, you're going to have trouble selling it, or you're going to have trouble getting that zoning and entitlements. So there's a lot that goes into this. This is by no means a very easy game, but it can be very lucrative. You can make a lot of money and you can make a really good impact on the community that you do this in. So hopefully you liked this video. If you did, click the like and subscribe button. If you didn't, then don't. Either way, drop a comment and let us know what you want to hear next time. Until then, see ya.